So Debbie, you'll have to do the rest of that by yourself. But I'm Debbie, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. And I'm animal and spinifex person. My kapli, my grandmother, my uncle, and many family members and other people died as a result of nuclear fallout from Maralinga. So I'm just going to talk about our experience with nuclear fallout and with the army, with government officials, and it was actually in the 1950s at the height of the Cold War. And while the rest of the world was holding ban the bomb protests, the British government began to explode a series of atomic bombs, which they said was an empty Australian desert that contained nothing but a few spinifex bushes and red dirt and the howl of dingoes. A number of minor trials, assessment tests and experimental programs were held at the range until 1963. Atomic bombs that were exploded in a forgotten land far away from Western civilization. White Australia now know that this place was not terra nullius, but home to another civilization who had lived in the desert for over 20,000 years. Sir Arthur Titterton from the documentary Backs to the Blast said, no Aboriginal was in the area where there was significant fallout, therefore a radiation dose. Therefore, no Aboriginal suffered any consequences of it. Spinifex elder Mr. Anderson said, I was with 7 other people and we were out hunting when I saw an airplane fly over. Then I heard a huge explosion. I looked up and saw a great red cloud rising to the sky. The smoke was bright red. The smoke was whirling around like a big willy willy. The smoke was also black. There was a great big wind. I was frightened. The ground was shaking. I thought it was the water snake. The snake had bitten someone or something. Excuse me. Now, Patrick Connolly, the corporal or a corporal in the British RAF between 1959 and 1962, stated, in fact, it was a standard joke around the camp as to how many bulls we picked up yesterday and how many we picked up the day before. And these people were just wandering around willy-nilly in radioactive, highly contaminated area, and nothing was being done. Hundreds of my family died. I was told that when one Gummal grandfather went back into surrounding areas of Maralinga, he saw people dead, beyond recognition, laying there like dead ants, burnt to a crisp. When he came back to Kundalini, a mission set up to bring my families in from the desert, he died 1 week later from radioactive poisoning. Other family members told me that the smoke was a long, long away. It was going straight up. Everyone was coughing, vomiting, and blood was coming out of people's mouth and nose. Family died. We were very sick. No one could walk. Everyone was crawling around. All we knew was that the wind had brought this terrible sickness. Crows fell out of the sky. They just dropped. Once we found some rabbits. They were cooked and blackened. We ate them. When some people ate the meat and when they drank water, they died. Children died. Mrs. Watson said, we came up to an airstrip. We were saying, what is this? We didn't know what it was. We saw tracks on the ground and then we just kept walking over the hills around the corner until we came up to the crossing, Neil Junction. And that is when we saw them, white faces, that army mob. Mr. Anderson said, We saw many soldiers in the area, but we hid because we were frightened. We could see army planes and would douse our campfires so that the smoke could not be seen from the air. We thought there was a war and that the soldiers had come to punish us. Military authorities relied solely upon reports by Government Native Patrol Officer McDougall and concluded that there was no need for Indigenous people to use any part of the country around the area for atomic testing. We have no idea how McDougall came to that conclusion, and in their wisdom, the government decided to put up signs written in English warning of bombs and radioactive fallout. But we didn't speak English, and we had never seen signs before. These signs were just popping randomly up in the desert. A story passed down said, we cautiously approached the sign. We scratched our heads, wondering what it was. We walked around the sign, looking it up and down. We hit the metal sign with our spear. It made a ringing noise, and we jumped back in surprise. Anyway, we walked away from the sign, shrugging our shoulders as to what it could be. Little did they know that they were walking towards death. The Mulpuddy family walked into a radioactive bomb crater at Maralinga. I was at Oak Valley visiting family and was introduced to Miss Mulpuddy. She was a teenager when she and her family walked into the radioactive bomb crater. She told me these strange people came, dressed in white clothing from head to toe and masks over their faces. They took them to the Maralinga Army campsite and made them go into a shower, and they sprayed them with cold water. A doctor examined them. It was the first time Miss Mulpuddy saw herself in a mirror, and it gave her such a fright. The army took them on a jeep to Yalata. It was a terrible journey. They had never been in a car before. Severe motion sickness, vomiting, and absolutely terrified at the speed at which the vehicle was travelling. Members of her family later died at a young age. Another story was a family member who had was walking, doing his stuff on country, and then an army helicopter came along and hovered above him. Now, he was absolutely terrified because he'd never seen an army helicopter before. He was running from tree to tree trying to hide from it. But the helicopter kept following him and coming down low. And he said that all the trees were shaking, the dust was flying everywhere. And when he went back to family, he described his experience as like a huge butterfly had come down from the heavens. So basically, that was our introduction to, white Australia, apart from years earlier when the railway was put in. That's quite an interesting story too. So when the government closed Uldea mission down in preparation for the atomic testing, the people were very sad. Where were they to go? This place now became their home. Mr. Jamieson told me that his family decided to go to Kalgoorlie. They went to the train line and snuck aboard a steam train as it moved slowly through the siding. Now, in those days, we travelled with fire sticks, and as the train picked up speed, the rocking of the train made them nod off to sleep. Sometime later, they awoke to find the wooden carriage on fire. It was severe, a big fire. The whole carriage was on fire. The women and children were screaming in fear as the train hurtled through the Nullarbor night. A couple of people jumped off the speeding train and disappeared into the night, never to be seen again. Others were burnt to death, and some younger men were able to climb onto the carriage next door and tried to assist others to do the same. Now, all of this happened because of the atomic testing at Maralinga. The British government, the Australian government have blood on their hands. Mr. Anderson said, "When I came back to Maralinga for the whitefellas, I became very angry that nobody warned us about the atomic testing and the danger of radioactive fallout and the desecration of our sacred sites. It is something that I have not forgiven the British for." So my family became refugees in their country. Meanwhile, Bob Stewart, a Christian man in America, had a vision to save the Aborigines of the Western Desert so he could educate and Christianise them. He came to Australia and set about setting up a mission northeast of Kalgoorlie and started bringing Spinifex people in from their nuclear contaminated homelands. My family told me a story about when they first met the missionary man. He pulled up in a vehicle and the people came out performing a welcome dance. We were naked, no trousers, no frocks, naked. And the missionary man stood there looking at us. He pulled out some clothes and said, "Here, you must put this on now." Clothing was all wrong way, upside down, inside out, arms going through trouser legs, legs through jumpers, and my Uncle Brooksy was walking around in a long dress. The missionary man left them with food supplies, and my Dummer, Mr. Underwood, was given tin meat. He said it looked like an egg. He'd never seen tin meat before. He tried cracking it, you know, like an egg. You crack open an egg and it wouldn't crack open. And so he threw it away. The missionary man could not understand why. It didn't enter his head that we had never seen tin meat before. But my family survived. We made it to Cundalee. Mr. and Mrs. Hanson told me it was a restricted lifestyle, poverty, lack of water. They said people's personalities changed. There were arguments and fighting. It was a bad place and no one was happy. We inherited a social disaster. While we understand the reason some of us were removed from our homeland, it is difficult to understand why the government deserted us once we were removed. And the evangelical experience at Cundalee left my people very little to be thankful for. Exposure to the Spirit of Christ left us little but the spirit of the hop and the grape for consolation. The Australian Evangelical Mission finally accepted defeat. The process of assimilation did not serve the Spinifex people very well. So today, my family are back at Junjundara, their homeland, and we have native title. We are doing the most fabulous things like two-way sites and that, and we are very concerned that the uranium miner, Deep Yellow, want to mine on our lands. We do not want them there. They have been destroying our lands, digging it up, clearing vegetation, and putting the lives of our native animals at risk. And this is their Mulga Rock venture. And I'm going to let K.A. speak further about this.
Thank you, Debbie. Much appreciated.